Coming to you entirely pre-recorded from the Garage of Solitude in Whitestone, Queens, I'm Mario Francisco Robles.
And from the Watchtower in Long Island, New York, I'm Brett Miro, and this is the Fanboy Podcast, episode 175.
175. And it feels like we just did this because we kind of just did. Full disclosure, ladies and gentlemen, we are recording this a full 24 hours before we normally would. We usually record at about 10 o'clock on Thursday nights. And this time we will not have the ability to do that because I have a rare DJ event this week on a Thursday night. And we want to get back on our weekly schedule. So we were not going to let this week go by. We promised you a show on Friday, and you are getting a show on Friday. Now, that means that right now it's only Wednesday, and it's only been 72 hours since we recorded episode 174. And really, not a whole hell of a lot's happened in the last 3 days. We've got some great topics lined up for you, and we're ready. We're gassed up and ready to talk. But not a whole ton has happened. And something that definitely has not happened is we did not get any of those DCU announcements from James Gunn just yet. Now, in the event that that announcement happens tomorrow, maybe we'll try to film like a cut in. I could try to add something. I might do something solo on my own before my event, or
we'll do our best.
If something major comes up, we'll try to update so that by the time the show comes to you on Friday, we have something to share on that front. But as of Wednesday night, there has been no formal announcement as of yet about the DCU's slate. There's been an interesting kind of tease about how James Gunn is looking at that, but we're going to get into that in a little while. But here we are. It's Wednesday night. We're ready to record. And why don't you get us started, Brett, with anything you've watched or played in the last 3 days that you kind of feel like sharing with people?
I mean, in the last 3 days, I think I've been doing the same crap that we talked about the other day.
Great.
I guess we did. When did we record?
Sunday night.
On Sunday night,
right after Last of Us. Yeah,
that's right. Yes, after Last of Us. Oh, so like I talked. Yeah, so like I didn't even talk about that because we talked about it already.
Yeah.
So I think, have I seen anything else in the last 2 days? We certainly watched something. No, I don't think so. I've been still playing Ghost of Tsushima. We can talk about one thing. So game wise, this month on PlayStation Plus, they put WWE 2K22 out, and I'm like a lapsed wrestling fan, but I still kind of keep abreast of it. I used to love the old games. We talked about this a million times. WCW vs NWO. WrestleMania 2000. Then there was Revenge, or whatever. What was the other one?
There was Revenge. There was WCW.
No Mercy
World Tour. And then, No Mercy, that was the big one. That was like
those were the ones like the old
off that era. Yeah.
Whatever developers are like, he was I don't even know the developers anymore. Anyway, the ones that had the cool was like
THQ,
Strong
AKI. Yeah.
THQ and Aki. Okay, so those games. And then I haven't really touched them after that. I think I played some of the Acclaim ones when it was like the Attitude Era for WWE, but those were like clunky as hell. So anyway, it was free, so I was like, all right, I'll download it. So I played a couple of matches, and then actually the night before we recorded this on Tuesday night, had an impromptu match against.
You decided to challenge me.
Well, you kind of
fool you are. No,
you were like,
the gauntlet on Sunday. You were like, "Hey, I got WWE 2K.
True, I did.
You want to have a match?" I'm like, "All right, if you want to lose, you noob." But
so I recorded on Tuesday. Yeah, I recorded my Last of Us weekly podcast of the chatter after, and then I literally launch up my PlayStation 5. I literally am on for about 2 seconds, and I just get a text. You want to play WWE? I said, let's do it.
Yeah.
So Mario and I played 2 matches online. He let me win the first one, and then the second one he properly beat me because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm getting better though. I did improve over those 2 matches. I think I was starting to get.
Well,
let
me ask you actually.
Yeah.
Considering your last round of playing wrestling games was 20 years ago, and those games were acclaimed for their ability to just be pick up and play friendly and more of like an arcade situation than a simulation type deal. How did it feel? What do you think of how the 2K series controls and all that kind of stuff. Does it feel? Are you?
Yeah, so I understand, if I'm not mistaken, too. Like they did a controller reconfiguration for 2K22 because that was the first game they took like a year off, didn't they? And I think they kind of looked at things. Yeah, they did. Okay, so because I think I did play like a few years ago, maybe at your house, like just looking around. And I remember being lost. So I was surprised. This was pretty pick up and play. So if you're like a lapsed wrestling fan, and you were worried like, oh, these things are getting complicated, too many buttons. I think for the most part, it does play like those old school games. I mean, there's two dedicated striking buttons. There's a dedicated grapple button. And then it's pretty much you're either pressing one of two buttons and then like a direction. And that's really what those games were. So it's pretty close, but there's like an added layer with, timing the reversals, like the counter. And like also there's like a couple of those cool, if you guess the right button that the opponent's pressing during a grapple, you could do a reversal.
Yeah.
I think that's like a cool element just to like give it a little bit of more of a challenge or a skill. I think it's pretty cool pick up and play. I will say that like, it's definitely some of the thing that I find annoying, and like, listen, it's a game that I'm sure it's super hard to develop for, with like collision detection and the different models, and there's just so many things. But there's some like very drawn out animations, and that can be corny. Like it's like they didn't program the interrupting of animation. So if there's a character like still has to do like a 6-second animation for a move, and you try to like kick him during that, like there's no reaction.
You could run him over with a car while he's doing that.
They finish the animation.
He's like, no, I'm in the middle of taking this chair out from under the ring, so you can do whatever you want, and I'm not gonna react. Yeah, I know.
So I find that a little obnoxious. And with the reversals, I wish there was maybe if they telegraphed a little better, like when it was time to hit the button. And I get maybe that's kind of like
you'll get the hang of. Yeah,
I think you will after playing. But I feel like it'd be nice to have like a little some kind of something. Or maybe an option to turn something on, for the babies, like the noobs like me, just to kind of like at least get a feel, and then I could like turn it off. Like think of like the Arkham games. I love the little, I got a counter now. He's got the little marker of his head. But when you play on extreme or hard mode, it takes those off, and you got to like start knowing the animation. So, but overall, that's a new thing, and that was.
And mind you, fun. Yes, and mind you, Brett fought me, MFR, in the game. I put my face in the game. I mapped it to the guy's head. He's got this exact hairstyle I've got tonight. He fought me, and I told Brett, now you need to send me a good picture of your face. I'm going to make you, and we're going to make a tag team called the Fanboys. Yes. And we're going to run wild over that tag team division, damn it.
We're going to take everyone out.
Yeah. And that's pretty much about as much gaming as I've done in the last 72 hours. And I haven't watched a damn thing since we last spoke. But I have been consuming a lot of other media. I've been binging essentially every single podcast appearance of my favorite stand-up comedian. You know him, Brett, because he's one of your favorites too. Mr. Louis C.K. has a big show coming up at the Garden on Saturday. And he's been doing this circuit where he's been on like 6 or 7 different podcasts over the last 2 weeks. And I've just been steamrolling through all those because I love listening to him talk and hearing his perspectives on things and how he puts together his comedy. And just, I think he's a brilliant mind. And I feel like I've been hanging out with Louis C.K. for the last 5 days, really, because I've just been binging conversation after conversation. He's been like everywhere. If you haven't,
did you see I watched one of these too, but did you see the 2 Bears 1 Cave one with Bert Kreischer?
Yes.
That was a very good episode. We in the Miro household here, we watch a lot of podcasts.
Watch your podcast. You're
like that's like one of like our things that's like really in the last probably since like COVID hit, like we do a lot of YouTube, and we watch like Your Mom's House. We watch Chris Delia's podcast. We watch a lot of podcasts.
Oh, wow. And he was on that too, Your Mom's House. So he was on 2 different Segura pods, even though Segura wasn't on the 2 Bears one this time. But he appeared on 2 different Segura pods. He was on the Joe Rogan Experience. He was on the Tom Dillon show.
He did stuff earlier in the year because of the Joe List movie, the movie he did with Joe List. 4th of July.
Promoting both 4th of July.
So he did a big run there. Which was very good. I don't know if you saw it.
Up.
It was really good. Yeah.
No, I didn't see it. But I bought my ticket for the live stream of his MSG show this weekend, and I'm gonna definitely buy the special when it comes out in April. And it's great to see him back in action and hear him out there doing his thing. I think he's just, his sense of humor, it's me.
It hits the
and
spot.
It's you. We laugh about some of this stuff, and it's like he makes you laugh at stuff that you can't believe you're laughing at. But it's he just does it in that way. He tiptoes through that minefield. He tap dances through it somehow. Right. So that's really like the only thing I've been really consuming. Hasn't been movies, hasn't been TV. Barely any gaming aside from beating the crap out of you last night. It's just been Louis C.K. podcast appearances. So really not much to report in the playing and watching department. So why don't we go ahead and get right into our Superman on Film update for the week? Unfortunately, there hasn't been much of anything over the last 3 days. There hasn't been any new updates. There hasn't been James Gunn having to step in and clarify any weird, bogus rumors. There haven't been any new rumors even. By the way, we should talk about that. I feel like, little by little, the rumor mill is going to be dying when it comes to the DCU because James Gunn is, basically he has such control over the narrative nowadays that no one can just come up with random stuff they heard in a DM.
He stamps it out right away. He's just like, shut up. No, wrong.
Yeah. So I feel like the variety of outlandish bullshit that's going to be flying around the internet is getting chopped down to almost nil. Yeah. And I'm in favor of that. I am all for that. Absolutely. So when it comes to Superman on Film, there's really nothing specifically to update there, but we can talk generally about what seems to be going on with James Gunn's DCU. Because you see, the other night on some other social media outlet, not Twitter, might have been that Mastodon thing or might have been Instagram. I have no idea where he did it. Somebody asked if he was going to be revealing the full 8 to 10 year plan, because he did mention that there's basically a 10-year plan of telling the biggest story ever told. And Gunn stepped in to basically clarify how much he's actually going to be revealing. In a response to this person, he said, "I'm not announcing the 8 to 10 year slate, just a few projects from the first chapter." And the only really thing notable there is people seem to be getting a kick out of this idea of the first chapter. The fact that he really is looking at this like it's going to be one long, big, cohesive story. And these first few films are meant to be the first chapter of that story. It's a cool sort of. Oh,
you see,
go ahead.
Stories have chapters.
Yes, they do.
Do you see the connection? Do you see it?
I see it. I see it. Although I like that. I like with the literary verbiage instead of phase 1 or, whatever, I like chapter 1, and it'll be interesting too, if it really feels that way. If as we start seeing these movies and seeing how the story unfolds, if it really all feels like this stuff is part of a coherent first chapter and a much larger saga, that's going to be pretty neat.
I also feel like he wants to avoid the phase 1, the wording phase. Well, this is just phase 1 or phase 2. So it's chapter 1, it's chapter 2. We got a different thing going on here.
Yeah. But yes. So just so you all know, since that user on that social media platform seemed to be unclear about exactly how much he's going to be announcing. Remember, we already assumed it's only going to be about 3 or 4 movies. That's why we were kind of keeping our guesses last week or on the last episode to about 3 films or 4 films. So I think that's about as much as we can realistically expect. And I'm totally fine with that. Let us know little by little. Let the story come to us in waves. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's kind of that when it comes to the DCU. But another property that involves Superman that's been getting spoken of a lot in these last few weeks is, of course, still to this day in 2023, the Snyderverse. Because right now it seems that the fan base there, ever since James Gunn made the decision to axe Henry Cavill and essentially ice any further continuations of DCEU versions of these characters. And he's seemingly transitioning Jason Momoa into a new role other than Aquaman or something along those lines. And we also know he pushed Wonder Woman 3 into some kind of redevelopment. So ever since it's become clear that James Gunn doesn't really have any intention of continuing on with the previous continuities, there's been a push to license the Snyderverse itself to Netflix. Because we know Netflix sometimes rescues canceled series, right? They have done that before. Some series gets axed and Netflix says, we'll take it for a couple of seasons, And some people are hoping that Netflix does something along those lines with the Snyderverse. And I'm sorry. Sometimes it's hard for me not to completely shit on and scoff at that idea when I'm on Twitter. It's hard for me to bite my lip because it honestly is sort of ludicrous. And I know Mark Hughes, he's called me, we've texted. Mark Hughes is a good dude, but over on Forbes, he wrote some editorial kind of making it sound like it would be an interesting play and a worthwhile thing to pursue and yada, yada, yada. Since, Zack Snyder is working over at Netflix, he's got a good relationship with them. He's making apparently multiple Rebel Moon movies. And since he is cozy and set up over there, they're like, why don't you bring him his Snyderverse continuity and let him finish it there? And, Zack Snyder's Justice League apparently had some decent streaming success on HBO Max and in international sort of metrics. Apparently, it did pretty well in 2021 when it came out. But here's the problem with that, okay? Realistically speaking, what this would entail is licensing away the Justice League. Okay, this isn't like when somebody kept saying, well, they have Sandman at Netflix and Sandman was a big hit. People have pointed out that there's other DC properties on other networks and yada, yada, yada. Yeah. Yes, but the Sandman is not Justice League. The Sandman is not Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, the Flash, Cyborg, Green Lantern. We know all the different ideas that Zack Snyder would have if he were to get to make his Justice League 2 and his Justice League 3. And the issue there becomes if you're David Zaslav and you've just hired James Gunn and Peter Safran to launch a brand new studio called DC Studios, with the entire purpose being that we're going to streamline all of DC on film so that there aren't 4 Batmen, as David Zaslav derisively pointed out once. If the point is to now bring everything in-house and have one sort of singular guiding hand over everything, how the hell are you going to license away your most pivotal characters to another streamer so that another director can make movies about them for the next few years at the same time that you're trying to launch a whole new thing with a lot of the same characters involved? Where's the logic? How does this actually make any real sense? Brett, does it?
No, I love this because it's like you said, they're trying to set a new, way forward, a new path, a new establishment of all the DC, universe. And then it's then they're just going to allow bootleg Justice League to appear on Netflix. It makes absolutely no sense. I mean, it would be confusing. Number one, I mean, listen, and I know there's stuff now that's going to be confusing, right? We're going to probably have a Batman and James Gunn verse. We have Pattinson. That's just now doing that is another confusing element. Then, like you said, I didn't even think about that, licensing away the Justice League, unless there was a way for them to just license that iteration of the Justice League so they could still use it for the gun. But it makes no sense. And even if they licensed away, I mean, I guess if they license away, they don't really have to invest and put up the money. I guess at that point it would be all Netflix. But the thing too is there's so many moving parts. Even if DC said, sure, license the Snyderverse to Netflix, and Netflix says, okay, we'll do it. Here's a bunch of money. And Zack Snyder's I'm on board. You still have to get all the actors and people that you would assume you'd want to bring people from the original production that know the look and the feel and the tone of what Snyder does and those movies that worked on him. So it's there's just so many moving parts that I see no one who's clamoring for this acknowledging. They're just thinking oh, if DC just did it, it would happen. And it's what planet are you on?
Why would they do it? What's the incentive?
Yeah, why? For what?
If you're
just to
James Gunn,
please you please your entitled ass. Where's even, there's not even any money in it really. Like, okay, they'll get a big lump sum payment from Netflix for the rights, and then there's nothing else. And then what?
And at the cost of what? At what cost would that lump sum become? Because now let's say James Gunn's reboot of Superman is about to come out, and he's trying to get all eyeballs on that because this is, the first step in this 10-year giant story he wants to tell. And at the same time, Justice League 2 is coming out at the same time. And here you have Henry Cavill dicking around in a black suit, causing distractions for that. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And especially because James Gunn has pointed out, too, that, like, everything is under his purview. Some people kind of thought that since the Joker 2 and other things were kind of set up at Elseworlds, he actually said in some response to someone early on that actually, no, everything will be falling under the DC Studios banner. Everything is going to be under him. Even the stuff that predates him, he's overseeing, and he's an authority over all of it.
Yeah, so like they're building a brand here. This is I mean, it is a brand already, but like they're establishing a brand and a new platform, for this to move forward. It's like, why do you again, we were just been talking for years about like how they've been muddying the waters with announcements and this, and then and the point too is like, honestly, I would actually root for this idea if I knew that if these people, these Snyder fans got these movies and it would guarantee that they would just shut up after, then I would say, go ahead, Netflix, do it. You know what? Take my 401k. I'll put that towards it. You know what I mean? I just don't know that these people will ever shut up, even if they get what they want. You know what I mean?
I think it's going to take another year or two before they realize that Netflix is not buying the Snyderverse, and for some of these new films to be announced and perhaps start to come out to firmly put the Snyderverse in the rearview mirror. Because that's the thing. As of right now, we still have holdovers. We still have relics of it with Jason Momoa's Aquaman. We don't know what's going on with Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, but James Gunn has kind of said she's sticking around at least for the time being. And we're about to see Ezra Miller's The Flash in about 5 months' time, still on the screen, and presumably a reference or two to things that he's been involved in that include the Snyderverse. So right now we've still got some holdovers, so you can kind of see them still keeping the spark of hope alive somehow. But once we get through this and now we move firmly into the new wave of stories, I think that's when we're finally going to be able to turn the page on all this Snyderverse stuff. But, honestly, it's a sort of ludicrous idea if you think Warner Brothers Discovery or DC Studios is like, take all of our most important characters and go take them down a road that we already know has been divisively received. So it's not even like we know that, oh man, Batman versus Superman did so well, so that's going to be great. Oh, Justice League was just a hands down winner. Like, no, even with Zack Snyder's Justice League, yes, it's streamed on HBO Max, and I loved it. You can go back to the episode where I saw it. I think it's Zack's opus. I think it's very good stuff. But by the mainstream standards, Zack Snyder's vision is not the thing that's taking these characters and these property to prosperity. Clearly, if that was working, he would still be in control in some way. Someone would have brought him back to complete his vision on the big screen if the dollars and cents all worked out and the math was right. But that has not happened. So you're going to license away all of your most important characters and the Justice League itself at a time when you're trying to rebuild and start a whole new thing. It doesn't make sense. There's no way they're going to go for it. And this is different than other stuff. This is different than restore the Snyderverse. This is different than release the Snyder Cut. Because at least those things, those hashtags, those campaigns, there was some reasonable expectation that it could happen because Warner Brothers, it would all be handled in-house. And Warner Brothers had all that footage in its archives. And they could just decide, all right, which they did. They could just decide, all right, Zach, come back, finish re-editing it and put it on our Warner Media streamer known as HBO Max. Like that at least had somewhat of a snowball's chance in hell of happening, and it did. But the idea of them handing over control of that IP to somebody else to make competing Superman and Batman stories while DC Studios is doing what they're doing, there's no business sense, there's no logic behind it. It's not going to happen. You can quote me on that.
Yeah. I mean, one thing too I want to like add in, like, we're saying that, like, okay, the Snyder, we still have these like quote unquote Snyderverse holdovers, like these movies that haven't come out yet. But like, I want to point out though that, like, yes, I guess some of the basis or like the look or like the tone of these characters, I guess, sprung from Zack Snyder, like the initial versions, and we saw versions of them in movies that he actually directed. But like, I also want to point out that, like, Aquaman 1 and this new one coming out, these are James Wan films. They're not Zack Snyder films. And yeah, maybe he like visually resembles the way like they established the character, but like he does feel different than he felt in the Snyder movies. Gal Gadot and Wonder Woman is 100. I mean, after Wonder Woman 1, I mean Wonder Woman 84, total 180, and I'm a defender of.
And that was kind of you're the one.
But yeah, I'm the one. But also like very different. Like. And The Flash even coming out. This is an Andy Muschietti job. You know what I mean? Andy Muschietti is a respectable filmmaker. He made these great It movies. He's doing stuff. So like, to also like say like, oh, these Snyder movies, Snyder's not involved with these anymore. He didn't make them. He didn't do anything. He was a part of an initial, introduction of those characters and maybe kind of laid like a little bit of a blueprint. But like, they really started to like take on a life of their own and be influenced by like the people that are running those franchises now. So like, I just want to, his name just needs to get out of there. It's like, these are not even Snyder projects. They're not holdovers. Oh, they're not holdovers from the Snyderverse. Okay. Yes. They have like, I guess they're linked canon wise to stuff that happened in Snyder's movies, but like, they really are like their own thing, at this point. And yeah, they're a little, I guess, out of the new box that is being built by James Gunn. They're kind of like that, like weird middle ground, but they're not Snyderverse films.
Not to mention,
all them Snyder films. They're not.
But not to mention too, like Darkseid's invasion of Earth. That's a pretty big storyline to just blow on a streamer somewhere. You may think, James Gunn may want to go to Darkseid at some point. You know what I mean? Like that's a possibility you want to leave open for the DCU. You don't want to blow your load doing the Darkseid invasion and the New Gods and that kind of stuff on Netflix. You know what I mean? You're going to blow it there. And now if they try to do it again in the DCU, now it's like, oh, we've already kind of been here, done that. Yeah. Like there's just there's no reasonable expectation that anyone would agree to something like this. It doesn't make a lick of sense. So no, there will be no Snyderverse to Netflix. I'm sorry, everybody. And by the way, there was a move that was announced earlier on Wednesday that kind of makes it clear too that like they're trying to focus the IP. They're trying to cut out extra things that don't fit within DC Studios' plans. We already know that the Arrowverse is essentially getting wrapped up and concluded, in the next big crossover event, I think with like the Flash. Everything is closing down. Stargirl's ending. Everything's ending. And on Wednesday, they announced that even the HBO Max DC series are now they're done. They're going to do season 4 for both Titans and Doom Patrol, but those will be the ends of those series. If you think this is just a coincidence, you're missing the bigger picture. Okay. Ever since Gunn and Safran came in, ever since David Zaslav and Discovery merged with Warner Brothers, creating Warner Brothers Discovery, they've been systematically cutting out all of these little pocket DC universes that were creeping up all over the place. That Walter Hamada was all for. Remember, Walter Hamada was happy to have all these pocket universes and just lean into the whole multiverse thing and let HBO do what it wants and let CW do what it wants and let the movies be all over the map. And that's what it is. That's not what David Zaslav wants. That is not what James Gunn and Peter Safran told him would be a good idea for the DC IP. So little by little, anything that doesn't fall directly under James Gunn's purview is getting the axe. It's getting snipped. So Titans and Doom Patrol are the latest DC projects going the way of the dodo. Did you ever get to watch any of those? Did you have opinions about either? I don't remember.
Nah, no? Titans I never watched, and like honestly, I haven't really heard that many good things about that show. But I mean, I'm surprised it even went to a season 4. Although Doom Patrol, I've heard that people really love that series and it's really fun, and I haven't checked that out.
Yeah.
But that one apparently that one seems a little more heartbreaking to the fan base because I think it's carved like a really niche kind of.
Well, that's one. Yeah, that's one I could vouch for. That's one I could vouch for. So when it comes to these two series, Titans, I only ever watched the first episode just to kind of see what it was about. And it really didn't do anything for me. It seemed like it was trying to be edgy. Everything felt very sort of forced.
Batman.
And yeah, you know, and it didn't grab me. And listen, sometimes shows find their groove after the first episode and whatever. I don't know. Maybe it deserves another shot. If any of our listeners or viewers out there think that I have not given Titans a fair shake, let me know. Because at least, see, I would actually watch it because it didn't just get outright canceled and it doesn't have a conclusion. It's going to get a final season, but that'll be the final season. You know, so they're going to conclude that story. When it comes to Doom Patrol, listen, I didn't go as far into it as I would like, but I remember watching, like, I think I got through the first like 5 episodes and I was pretty blown away by it. I loved the originality of it. I think it has a very unique voice. I think it's a very sort of like, it's just a totally unique animal. I think you definitely should check it out. It's quirky, it's strange, it's offbeat. It's got Brendan Fraser pre his full comeback renaissance here with The Whale. Doom Patrol is really kind of what brought him sort of back into the zeitgeist a little bit, and he's pretty great in it for what he does. And Matt Bomer's in there, and it's great to see him involved in a DC project after he flirted with being Superman there for a little while. And just overall great casting, interesting story. It's like nothing you've really seen before. It's like a wacky X-Men sort of concept, but it works. It works. And I heard it just continued to get better and better.
Yeah, I've really only heard good things. It's like I really have not heard any negative feedback from the show. So but Titans, I feel like I've heard a lot of negative stuff.
Yeah, I'm tempted to try and like catch up with Doom Patrol. So when it gets that final season, maybe we can go episode by episode on a weekly basis and just give some thoughts on the episodes as they go. Because that one I think was definitely worth it.
You know what, maybe Netflix could pick up these series, you know?
Apparently, let's license them out. It makes sense.
Yeah, license them out to Netflix.
To somebody other than Warner Brothers Discovery. Yes. Why didn't I think of that?
Like, I want to actually, sorry, one more thing. I want to go back to that really quick because, like, even fucking Marvel took away their shows from Netflix.
It's true.
Marvel had hit shows on Netflix, and even they were like, I ain't doing this shit anymore. We're doing everything in-house. So, like, think about
somebody tried to use that as a justification. Like, well, Marvel let Daredevil and all that stuff go on Netflix. Like, first of all, you're excluding what's happened since then. Yeah. But also, like, at that time, there was some sort of plan. You know, Jeff Loeb was running Marvel TV and Kevin Feige was doing Marvel, the big stuff, but there was some semblance of synergy there, and they were kind of on the same page until they weren't. But yeah, it doesn't, the comparison is not apt. This is not
also,
that situation.
if you remember back in the 90s and early 2000s, Marvel licensed away all their fucking characters to all these different studios and production houses, and then had to battle their way back and acquire and get bought by Disney in order to bring everything back under their house. So, like, think about that. Do you want that? Do you want DC to now lose it, and then we just have a bunch of morons buying rights and making shows without like a big brain, overseeing everything? Like James Gunn.
Yeah, that's a great point because DC has always had the luxury of being owned by one entity. Warner Brothers has owned DC since like 1969. So technically they could have been doing some kind of shared universe from the beginning. They could have beat Marvel, by 50 years if they wanted to really do that. But they've always had the benefit of they don't have to see, who has the rights to Green Lantern? Oh, who has the rights for the rights to Wonder Woman? Oh, who's working on a Catwoman movie? So we can't touch Catwoman. Like DC has never had to worry about that. And now at this time when they, they're ready to launch a sort of unified vision here under new leadership and under DC Studios, in what sense would it make now to start licensing things away? You know, just like Marvel did. As soon as Marvel got their act together and they were no longer in bankruptcy like they were in the 90s, remember, we would have gotten a Spider-Man from the GOAT in the 90s, because James Cameron wanted to make a Spider-Man movie with Leonardo DiCaprio as Peter Parker. He was going to have the organic webbing that Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire ended up stealing. And the only thing stopping James, by the way, after I ran down his resume last week and how the guy does not miss, can you imagine James Cameron unleashing his full imagination and potential onto the Spider-Man IP, especially at that time? You know, like, and the fact that he wanted to do it, it was like a passion project. It wasn't like somebody said, "Hey, Jim, do you think you'd want to make a Spider-Man movie?" Like, no, he wrote a whole treatment. He presented it. He wanted to do it, but Marvel just couldn't afford to make it happen. Marvel was in such disarray that they couldn't let James Cameron make a Spider-Man movie. Okay. But 10 years later, as soon as they had their ducks in a row, as soon as the money was okay, as soon as they were able to launch Marvel Studios, they started bringing everybody home as much as possible, you know? So why would DC, who has everyone in-house, start shipping them off to non-Warner Brothers companies right now?
Makes no sense.
Come on. It doesn't make sense. But either way, rest in peace, Titans. Rest in peace, Doom Patrol. You know, stay tuned for those final seasons and some analysis here on this show about them. And one show that hasn't been canceled yet, and I'm surprised by this, honestly, with all of the Arrowverse basically getting folded, our favorite is sticking around.
Because it's not a part of the Arrowverse.
I know, but it's still interesting though that they're willing to let this continue on. They when they announced,
well, hopefully maybe they don't want to announce the cancellation yet while the new season's about to launch. Maybe they're going to like wait halfway through and be like, by the way, they have one more season after this. But I'm hoping.
I don't know. I mean, they did it with Titans and Doom Patrol. They said this will be the 4th and final season. They could say, I feel like that's become the norm now. Like they just announced Cobra Kai last week is coming back for a 6th and final season. If anything, it gives it a little more immediacy. You know what I mean? It might help with the ratings when the fans know, oh, I better see this because it's going to be over soon. You know? So with Superman and Lois, there has been no such announcement that season 3 is the end of the road for this phenomenal bit of Superman storytelling. And on the contrary, they just announced that they've got their Lex Luthor. And it comes in the form of Mr. Michael Cudlitz. Now, the way I know Michael, well, not personally, but I know Mr. Cudlitz from The Walking Dead. And even though that's a series, that I bailed on somewhere, I think in like season 8 or 9, I was there long enough. But I was there long enough to see the fruition of his whole arc, you know, from when he's first introduced to then his ultimate demise. So I got to see his full run. Spoiler alert. But I got to see his full run on The Walking Dead. And I remember thinking even then, I'm just like, this guy is a very good actor. There's something, he had a lot of layers early on. I didn't know how to feel about him too, because at first he comes on as sort of like an antagonist with these other weird Yahoo characters, and he's a little bit scary and intense. But then you start getting to know him, and he's this big teddy bear, and he has, just like, he's a real actor. He's not just someone who looks the part, you know.
He had some. I have to say, just kind of randomly, but he had also, not his fault. There was some real bad writing for his character at sometimes, and to this day, I just want to point out he said one of my favorite lines I've ever heard on a television show, and I still just surprise my wife and whisper it to her all the time. And can I tell you what the line is?
Please do.
Michael Cudlitz goes, "Mother dick." He straight up has a line on The Walking Dead, and he just goes, "Mother dick." And I was like, "Mother dick."
So you and Jesse have some interesting pillow talk there. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Just when I want to bother her, she's just like watching a show, and I just go, "Mother dick." And it's always a great laugh.
I feel like we all have those lines that just live rent free in our heads for a while.
No, it's a horrible line, but he owned it. It's a terrible line. He did it. He knew it was bad, and he did the right thing, and he was great.
He owned it.
But
he did it.
I'll never forget it. I will never.
You know
forget
what lives rent free in my head, and this is random and it's unrelated, but just it's something that every once in a while I whisper to people. When I was seeing the Chronicles of Riddick, okay, with Vin Diesel.
Never even seen that. Like, I hate Vin Diesel.
Well, it was a press screening, so in my defense, I didn't pay for it. Okay,
but
I went with Jeremy Scully, your Play It Loudcast former co-chair there.
Jeremiah.
But I went to go see the Chronicles of Riddick with Jeremy at a press screening, and at a certain point, there's a thing where like, I guess he's been imprisoned for a long time and something happens where I don't even remember anymore. It was a terrible movie. But I remember like now he's been released and he's in some palatial castle type deal because they were going to send him on some kind of a mission. And before they debrief him, like, he's been, in prison for a while. So they go and he goes to like they're bathing him and washing him and preparing him. There's beautiful women around and this and that. And then that deep Vin Diesel voice, he's like, "It's been a long time since I've smelled beautiful." And it's like, and he's trying to say like, because he smells a pretty woman. But me and Jeremy just busted out laughing.
No, that's
hears
awful.
This, yeah.
Goofy as shit.
It's been a long time since I've smelled beautiful. So sometimes that just pops into my head and I'll creep up on Kristen while she's cooking. I'll get up behind her and say that to her.
That is way creepier than Mother Dick.
I don't know. Mother Dick to the mother of your child who's coming in 2 months. I don't know, man.
Less than like 5 weeks.
Yes. Oh my God. On Mario Day.
Like,
but okay, let's get this show back on track.
Anyway, Michael Cullen. So this is awesome, man. First of all, listen, we didn't know we were getting Lex Luthor next season, right? I don't think we had any. So
we know we're getting Intergang. And they cast another Walking Dead guy. Now that I make the connection, it's another Walking Dead guy. I forget his name now. But the guy who's playing the leader of Intergang, whatever his name is.
Is it find out who it is. I know who it is.
I'm gonna look it up while you talk about why this is awesome.
So this is awesome because not only did we like find out, oh shit, we're getting our Lex Luthor is coming into the picture, but then like we immediately also got the casting, and the casting seems pretty cool, and I can't wait to see what he looks like, and I can't wait to see how he's going to play the character and like how this iteration is going to be on the show. And also it's like 100% Lex Luthor is going to be working with Intergang, right? Like this is perfect. It's like totally perfect. Yeah. It's already set up, and like this is great, and it's what a nice build up, man. This is season 3 now. And now we're getting to Lex. There's been a nice build up. There's been a lot of other adventures. And then we're going to have our new Jonathan this season as well. That was a weird situation, huh? So that'll be getting used to it. And then, man, I love the show, man. I'm excited. I really hope we don't get a cancellation. I mean, this is a real bright spot. Hopefully James Gunn sees it and goes, yeah, no, the show's good.
Yes. And the guy's name is Chad Coleman.
Coleman. Right. Yes, he was Dead. Tyrese on The Walking Dead.
Yes, there you go. Yes,
who was like pretty cool character in the comics, from what I understand, because everyone was like really excited when he was coming to the show. But like the way they utilized him was like he was like not cool and he was like annoying.
Yeah.
Let's see if he's good.
One of the things I like about Cudlitz though too is like I remember he's kind of like a big imposing figure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's a big imposing figure. And like, we've seen lots of versions of Lex, and recently in the Arrowverse, right? You had John Cryer, who's like a small geeky guy. You had Jesse Eisenberg as like the tech geek version of Lex Luthor. Kevin Spacey wasn't particularly physically intimidating. And Gene Hackman more or less
only 2 young men
for laughs. Yeah, So yeah, we haven't had like a large, physically imposing Lex Luthor in a while. Honestly, the one that comes to mind for me is like in Superman the Animated Series, the one voiced by Clancy Brown.
Yeah,
that's the Lex Luthor that seems most likely to kick Superman's ass.
Yeah, he's broad-shouldered, right? He's like barrel-chested, and I remember that.
Yeah. So I like that he comes off as large and imposing, but also I like that he does innately look kind of like a kind, soft guy. And I kind of like that though, because Lex Luthor should kind of have 2 sides. I've always liked the Lex that has the public face and then who he really is behind the scenes. And I don't think they've really revealed yet what version of Lex Luthor this is, right? Because we've had all kinds of versions. There's been the mad scientist, there's the President Luthor, there's the insane, the businessman one. There's been all kinds of ways to play him and what kind of a presence he has in Metropolis. But I'm wondering if they're going to have sort of like the dual identities of Lex Luthor in this, or if he's just going to be straight up evil. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I can picture Michael Cudlitz in a suit delivering a heartfelt, seemingly heartfelt speech to people, and then behind closed doors, working
just
on
being a tyrant.
You know what I mean? So I like they hired a guy with range who can be both scary and a big teddy bear at the same time. So I feel like that's going to be interesting, and also, we're going to find out what his history is. Remember, this is Superman and Lois. They're already in their 40s. They've already gone. Superman has already existed and faced most of his rogues and all that kind of stuff at this point. So if Luthor is not in prison, it's going to be interesting to see, well, then what is the dynamic and what is their history in this continuity? So it's going to be fun, especially, now after that. Remember the big bait and switch at the beginning of the series where after Master Chief takes off his helmet and you see it's a bald black guy, but the suit's like, Mr. Luthor, something, and everyone's like, oh, that's him. And then it ends up being John Irons. So, after the bait and switch at the start of season 1, we are in fact getting Lex Luthor in season 3. And I kind of have a feeling though, too, since they seem to cast him very recently, and we know the show is coming out, I think we're about a month away or something like that. I think it's I think it's March 14th. So you're not going to get to see it because you're going to have a newborn. But
maybe when I'm not sleeping, I can just do it.
That's true. But so when that comes out, so either way, so if they just cast him this week, and they've been in full production on season 3 for several months now, it makes me feel like he's going to be more of a setup for season 4. You know what I mean? I feel like he's going to be someone who comes in at the tail end and maybe the final episodes, or maybe even in just one key scene. You know what I mean? Because it seems like they're bringing him on sort of late in the production for season 3.
Well, Luthor, whatever you want to call him. He's like
Mr.
a very
Luthor.
Mr. Luthor. He's a opportunistic villain, and I could see, like, obviously Intergang being the main focus for the majority of the season.
Maybe they have a mysterious benefactor.
Either that, or like maybe in the aftermath of whatever the resolution is between Superman and Intergang, there's some kind of material left behind, or some kind of like vacuum of power that he could fill, and like he kind of seizes on some opening that happens as a result of the end of that Superman Intergang conflict, and then that totally propels him into season 4.
Or he even tries to come in
when they announce the cancellation of the show and they finish with Lex Luthor. So it actually works perfect if you think about it. This is perfect.
It's true. You end on Luthor in season 4. I mean, that could. I hope it doesn't end. My hopes for HBO. I just telegraphed what I'm going to say. My hopes for Superman and Lois is that it leaves the CW and becomes like an HBO Max exclusive. Because it already looks very cinematic and like a movie. It's always been treated like a step above the rest of the Arrowverse fans.
Yeah,
and I know that they put the episodes on HBO Max and they tend to do well there. So I feel like I would love it if they transition that series away from CW and have it go full time to HBO Max. And that way too, like, maybe that Superman can continue to exist in whatever sort of multiverse we're setting up here. I don't know.
Right.
I hope they don't cancel it though, because it really is the best Superman thing going for a very long time now. And I'm so excited we're getting season 3. And now we can move on to some other topics here. I see you're going to take us towards our old friend, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What's going on, Brett?
Yeah, so that's something I talked about a while ago. There was a new Ninja Turtles series that had come out in the comics. IDW published it, and it's with the original creator, Kevin Eastman, and a couple other names I don't remember. Eastman always sticks out. So he was like one of the original Ninja Turtle creators, like for the comics, that then got adapted into the very popular '90s show and so on and so forth. So they did a series probably about within the last like 2 years. It probably took a while for each issue to come out, but it's called The Last Ronin. And I'm gonna give some like spoilers a little bit. So I guess if you don't want to get spoiled in that series, if you haven't checked it out, I mean, all the issues are out. You can get it. It's on digital on Amazon. Blah 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 blah. I'm gonna spoil some stuff. So that series takes place in a future, the future of the comics version of the Ninja Turtles. And basically, it is now they live in a New York. Let's put it this way: all the turtles are dead except for one of them. And Splinter is dead.
What?
That's how the series opens up. It's in the future.
Wow.
It's on. Manhattan is completely walled in and basically run by the Foot Clan and Shredder's grandson. And the whole series is you find out at the end of the first episode that the one remaining is Michelangelo, and all of his brothers in Splinter died by Oroku Saki by the grandson. Which is Karai. So if you remember the character Karai, it's her son. Shredder's obviously grandson. So yeah, that's like the whole setup. It's kind of got this like Blade Runner ninja kind of like feel and look to it. It's very cool. And there's a lot of cool flashbacks, and you see actually how each of his brothers fell. And it's Michelangelo kind of just like dealing with legacy and getting revenge for the murder of his whole family, and like putting this clan war to the end. Like, and the series goes around from New York to Japan to Asia to Europe. It's like actually pretty crazy. And it's like, very adult, very kind of pretty violent and bloody. Actually, it's kind of cool. The comics are like not soft like the kid shows. It's like really dope. So a really, really cool series. But at the end of that, so again, I'm spoiling it, guys. So if you don't listen, okay, I'm spoiling it. Michelangelo does, they have a final confrontation, and he wins. He kills Shredder's grandson, but he also passes away.
Oh,
and the thing, but there's a little tease at the end of it, and April is still alive in this. She's missing an arm, but she has like a prosthetic, and she has a daughter, the daughter of her and Casey Jones, who I think is named Casey, if I'm not mistaken. And Casey Jones is dead too. He also did not make it. So Shredder Clan wiped out.
Very uplifting story. Yeah. Yeah.
It's Logan. It's Logan. That's 100% what it is.
I should have said it, because I was going to say it's very Logan that they killed off all the X-Men mysteriously. Yeah.
It's Logan from Ninja Turtles, but at the end of the series, you see I think it's Casey, April's daughter, and April, and they're in their lair, and you see that she has a tank, a little like pet tank, and there's 4 baby turtles in it, and they leave it off like that as a tease. So I just found this out today, right before we recorded. I haven't checked the issue out yet. I think it just came out today, so I'm gonna pick it up. But they announced another series.
I saw the headline.
Yeah, they announced another series called TMNT: The Last Ronin, The Lost Years, and what it's actually going to cover is the gap in time, almost like a prequel. Up to The Last Ronin. So what happened, like maybe some time with the other brothers, and what Michelangelo did for years on his own, like on the journey. Because also you get a kind of like an impression from the beginning of the comic that like he's made a couple of attempts to like break into the city and kill him before, like, and it's not succeeded. And actually he does try in the beginning of the comic and does not succeed, and then like has to do a whole thing and gets back up. It's like, he has to break into like this, and Baxter Stockman's around. He has all this technology. It's like, it's crazy. It's like really cool. A lot of cool characters come back and all that. But also, little tease is that not only is this a prequel, this comic that's coming out, The Lost Years, but it's also a bit of a sequel. And they released some stuff today, and we do get a look at these 4 new turtles. A little bit older. Yeah. They're still very adolescent. So they're but yeah, there's like 2 girls, 2 guys. They have different names. We don't know what weapons yet. They don't have masks yet, but yeah, they basically, like at the end of that series, like April, and they mutated 4 new turtles, and they're kind of like planting like for a new Ninja Turtle series, which is kind of cool. So we will see what happens with that. But I just wanted to shout out, in case you were a fan of that series and weren't aware that this one was coming out, now you know. And if you haven't checked out the original, I know I spoiled it if you listened, sorry, but like a lot of the reveals come pretty easy, and like I left so much stuff out. It's actually pretty dense. It's really cool, and I was always super impressed with how they handled Michelangelo, the trauma of losing his family, because there's a lot of scenes where you see him talking to the ghosts of his brothers and hashing out a lot of pain and stuff. And there's a particularly cool scene where he lashes out at Raphael for always being an asshole. And like you always wonder that like Michelangelo was harboring that for years.
Yeah,
and now he's like
he's like the easygoing party
and he's
guy,
like an older man now, and he's like not the party dude anymore. He's bitter, he's sad, and undergone a little bit further mutation. He's like a lot more bulkier and like, you know, stuff. So it's a really, really cool series. So I'm sorry I chewed everyone's ear off about that, but I'm obviously very passionate about it. It's cool.
Yes,
so that's really exciting.
You are. Now,
but yeah.
Something that everyone seems to be passionate about lately is that The Last of Us is getting it right in terms of adapting video games into the visual medium. It's apparently checking all the boxes, and people are feeling like, wow, video game adaptations are finally good, or finally about to get good, thanks to The Last of Us. But I think you have a feeling about the impression that The Last of Us is the first good video game adaptation.
Yeah, this obviously like you know, and this also goes like with the creators and the press for The Last of Us. They've been saying like, yeah, we're not gonna fall into the video game adaptation curse, and they're bringing up this whole dialogue again. I want to remind people that like we've actually been having really good video game adaptations for like the last like 3 to 4 years, and I want to remind people, Detective Pikachu, if you hadn't seen it, actually was a really good movie. And, you know, while not necessarily, actually, that is an adaptation of a game. It is. They did release Detective Pikachu game, but, you know, while it's not like a straight up Pokemon of the series adaptation, it's very good. We had 2 Sonic the Hedgehog movies that, you know, I think are just like okay and fine, but very successful at the box office. And for the most part, fans are very happy with them. A lot of, especially in the second one. If you didn't see the second one, a lot of great fan service. We've also had the Castlevania animated TV series.
If you didn't say it, I was going to.
Which I want to tell you. If you haven't watched it, even if you don't know Castlevania, don't like it, it's like really good. It's really good. Like it's awesome. So that's like another one. So we've actually been having quite a few really good video game adaptations. And you know, Last of Us is out now. It's on Prestige TV. It's on HBO. So they want to push the narrative again. But you know, I just want to say like that narrative is like a little like it's tired at this point. It's like, no, we've been having good ones now. And also if what I'm seeing of the Mario movie is as good as the trailers have been, that movie's going to be absolutely tremendous. So I'm a little tired of the conversation because like we've had them. Also, I just want to point out too, and no disrespect to The Last of Us, hey, I'm on a weekly review show about it. I love the show and I love the game. But to be fair, the game is basically a movie. The game is like so there's literally like I think if you go on YouTube, you could just watch all the cutscenes, like people splice them together. That game maybe takes 15 to 20 hours to beat. There's like 5 to 6 hours of cutscenes. I'm not even joking. Like so it's already. And it's the way it's structured. It's almost structured episodically in the actual game itself. It's a movie that you happen to move the character through. So that's really what it is. So I mean, not to like, you know, poo-poo the show. Because again, I'm loving it. It's incredible. But like they had a pretty easy, I think, transition from that. And you know, they definitely made some tweaks that work, but it was already primed for that, you know?
But that's the thing. Like you could argue that a lot of games already lay out a nice blueprint for what a film adaptation or a TV series adaptation should be, and yet Hollywood has always found a way to screw it up until these last few years. You know, it seems like the big difference now is there's an emphasis being put on faithfulness. You know, there's an emphasis being put on if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The things that worked about this as a video game are the same things that'll make it work in the other medium. And it honestly sort of reminds me of like the trajectory that comic book movies have gone in over the years too. Because especially if you look at like some of the earlier pre-Marvel Studios Marvel stuff, you could see almost like a self-consciousness about trying to be like the books. You know, if you look at like the black leather suits from Bryan Singer's X-Men movies and stuff like that, like he never embraced the costumes, and the storylines were always very loosely adapted from stuff in the comics. But, you know, like Days of Future Past, you know, it was a great reference to a beloved arc, but it didn't, you know, it wasn't really an adaptation of Days of Future Past. And they've tried Phoenix multiple times. With the Phoenix. Yeah.
Well, they did that twice. And it wasn't.
And even with like the original Superman movies, like aside from his suit and a lot of other stuff, like, you know, on the appearance wise, when you go to, after Superman 2 and you see Superman 3 is about some made up villain named Charles Webster and his wacky girlfriend and mean older sister, and here's Richard Pryor. That's not from the comics. They had him at that point in time. They had like 40 years worth of Superman stories they could mine from the books. But Hollywood always kind of had this weird thing. The comics are for kids. We're going to adapt it our way. You know, there was like this weird self-consciousness. So Superman 3 wasn't comic book based. Superman 4 with Nuclear Man wasn't comic book based. You know, and then just early on, like it just seems like it took a while for Hollywood to figure out that the biggest successes are when you actually adapt the source material in a faithful and meaningful way. You know, and that's why you like Marvel Studios has shown that. If you look at the costumes, if you look at the way that they've attempted to adapt the stories, I know Civil War, you know, they took what was a like huge megalomaniacal gigantic story and distilled it into something much simpler, but by and large I feel like they've been much more willing to wear their comic book roots on their sleeves, and they've rode that wave to great success, right? And I feel like video game adaptations is like a similar thing. We're like, we're going to take a little bit of what works about this, but we're mainly going to adapt it into what we like. Like I always go back to like the Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil movies with Mila Jovovich, where it's like you could have just adapted Resident Evil. Those survival horror games, those first few ones, they lent themselves perfectly to being a spooky survival horror zombie movie. And they turned it into some action vehicle for Mila Jovovich to run around and shoot things and do flips. You know, like a lot. Don't even get me started on the Super Mario Brothers movie with Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo that made me cry in theaters. I literally cried. Okay. So like Hollywood had that same sort of mindset with video game adaptations for the longest time of like, we're just going to, we'll keep the character names. We'll keep an element or two from the original concept, but we're going to like make it our own. We're going to Hollywood it up. And if you look at these ones that everyone's raving about now, like Last of Us, like the Sonic movies, like the hype around this Mario movie that's coming, like Castlevania, the ones that are having the most success and creating the most buzz are the ones that are most faithful. So it seems like Hollywood has finally figured out with video games what they figured out with comic books, you know?
Like, I think it's also like choosing the correct medium for the project. You know, Resident Evil games, well, not very long. A lot of them too, especially once you like play through them once, you could probably burn through them way quicker the second time around. But you know, like the Resident Evil movies, they said, okay, let's make them movies instead of doing something like a series. Like when you do a movie, you just can't properly explore things. But like something like Sonic, which is not that story heavy, and I know there is lore, and Sonic fans are probably like, there's so much deep lore for Sonic. There is actually, but like for that, you can do a hour and a half, 2 hour movie and just get the essence of Sonic, because it's not like this cinematic story driven thing. It's just, oh, he's a blue hedgehog, it's fun. You know what I mean? Like you can get the essence, but like Resident Evil to try to, and listen, I know they did try to do a Resident Evil series, but they decided to do some weird thing on Netflix and it didn't do well. But you know, something like The Last of Us, like they were originally planning for the last 10 years, we're planning on doing like a Last of Us movie. That was the rumor. If they had to do that as a movie and cram that into 2 hours, even if they went 3 hours, like, no, it's not going to work, man. You don't have the time with the characters. Like the reason that story works, especially in video games, when you're dealing with 15, 20, 30, 40 hour stories, sometimes longer, like you need that. You can't just shrink that down to, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? So something like The Last of Us, it works. They're doing a series and they're giving it time to breathe. And in this case, it also happens that the creator, you know, of the series, of the game, who also directed the game and everything, is basically one of the main guys working on the show. In fact, he actually directed the most recent episode. He was the director on it, Neil Druckmann.
Oh wow,
so
I didn't know that. Wow,
it's literally like there are some things that are shot for shot from what he shot in the game, and that's really cool.
That's cool.
So that's kind of one of the things, you know, like, and a lot of these other adaptions don't usually have the creatives involved. You know, maybe they consult a little bit, they give a couple of, you know, do this, and this, but they're not involved. Like, he's on set, like telling like the zombies, like, no, you have to move like this. Like, legit, there's behind the scenes photos where he's like, it's a move like this, you got to sound like this, and it's all, you know, practical effects and acted, and they're doing it the right way. So that's the thing, is choosing the correct medium. Castlevania, I don't know if that would make an interesting movie, but guess what? It made an awesome 3-season anime.
Well, I think you cracked the code on it, though. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you pointed out that like some games are story heavy and some aren't.
Yeah,
and if
Mario's going to be a great movie.
One,
you know what I mean? Mario is going to be a great movie.
Exactly. And those games
Yamato says, I don't even care about story. He's straight up, he's like, story does not matter. He's like come out and been like, story doesn't matter in Mario. That's why everything opens up with a quick cutscene. Okay, she got kidnapped. Here's Bowser, airships, go get him. Like, bam. He doesn't care about that. It's about the gameplay. But like, you know, but that's great, because then you can frame you know, this movie, which is like a fish out of water story and coming from the real world, how they got into the Mushroom Kingdom. Like, that's perfect. Like, do all the fleshing out there. You don't need it for the game. Like I said, Sonic works as a movie, but Resident Evil with all this exposition and stuff, and Last of Us with all this exposition and backdrop and world building. No, it's not going to work in a 2-hour movie.
Same thing you could argue with Assassin's Creed. You know, Assassin's Creed has this huge, insane lore. It should have been a TV series, not a crappy Michael Fassbender movie.
Are working on a TV series now, believe it or not. So that will probably be good. We have a Splinter Cell series in development. That should be hopefully good.
But that's the thing though too, because like I remember flying to London and being at Pinewood Studios and interviewing with Michael Fassbender and the producers of Assassin's Creed. And at the time, like they were going for faithfulness. And if you did you see it?
I did.
Did you see the movie? Yeah. So like the movie attempted to actually really kind of adapt and mine some of the real mythology from the games. And they had Ubisoft, like people on set there to like tweak the script. And they were like, you know, Ubisoft was very hands-on. And they were saying too, like anytime that they tried to take a departure from something, some Ubisoft guy would just drop from the ceiling. Like, no, you can't do that. That's not, but again, that's not faithful to the world we've built. You can't condense that into a 2-hour movie. You can't. It would have been better off as a prestige series on, you know, on a and I think
we're now going to probably get that. And then listen, we have God of War coming from Amazon, but again, they're going to be adapting the 2018 reboot, and just like The Last of Us, it's really well written already.
Yeah.
And it's cinematic. It's going to be a TV series.
Okay.
So they're going to have the time to stretch it out, and the story's already there. I mean, like I said, The Last of Us too, like if you're watching it, I mean, there are literally like some of the dialogue is legit line for line. Yeah. Because guess what? That scene was already friggin' good. We don't need to change it. You know, so like there's stuff. We're getting a Horizon TV series, like Horizon Zero Dawn, like that. So Sony's going big into this now. But again, TV series, because hey, we know we're not going to do this just in 2 hours. But guess what? If they decide, hey, we're going to do like a Little Big Planet movie, oh yeah, that'll work perfect. A 2-hour movie,
could be a movie. Exactly.
Boy and a little shit.
Yeah.
Perfect. You know what I mean? So it's just a great medium for it.
You know who was ahead of the curve on all this? I remember us having conversations and having questions sent in by our friend from Sweden, Mr. Isaac Wolf, way back when we were doing the Revengers podcast. I remember something like 4 years ago, Isaac saying that honestly, the TV medium is better for video games than movies. And
these are long form stories.
Failing is because they keep trying to cram 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, and it doesn't work. But in a series where you could do a slow burn and build up and really have the story unfold the way it does in the games and take your time with it, let it breathe. He always said that he thought TV was going to be the thing that brought us the golden era of video game adaptations. And wouldn't you know it, Isaac, you were right. So I just think I needed to kind of shout that out there.
I actually played I played a Mario Party 2 for N64 because it's on Nintendo Switch Online. We played Monday evening together actually, and we were talking a little bit about Nintendo franchises that you know, if the Mario Brothers movie goes well, it seems like Nintendo's probably poised to bring more franchises. And we were literally having this conversation. We're like, Mario's perfect as a movie. We were like, if they do Metroid, I think that could be live action and that shouldn't be animated. And that would actually, Metroid is not super, it's got a lot of lore, but it's not story heavy. It's more about the atmosphere. So I think you could do
maybe
a
just
2-hour
like a
movie.
6-episode limited series, maybe.
I think Metroid could fit in a movie just because I think you could do a 2-hour little action. Okay, I got a distress signal. I got to go there, got to destroy this stuff and get out of there and escape before the planet explodes. So that'll work. But Zelda, I don't want to see CG. I think I'd rather see hand-drawn animation, and I think you need a series for that. I don't think that works in a movie. So
what about live action? You want animated for Zelda?
I don't know if I want to see live action.
Like imagine something with the.
It's just gonna look like Lord of the Rings.
Like,
I don't know, or Game of Thrones.
Well, that's
like it's just gonna look like
if something that was like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, but given that level of detail, but in the world of the Legend of Zelda, I don't know. That is still.
I think Zelda is such a quirky game and has a lot of quirky, fun characters. And always has this like dreamy, beautiful art, like painterly art style. And I feel like do that, you know what I mean? Like, don't just make it like live action real, and then just try to like ground it. Like, no, that's part of the fun with Zelda. I love when you like talk to some weirdo and they're like, they make a stupid noise, and like that's the fun.
I can't find my cuckoos.
Yeah, or like idiots like that. Like that works in animation, but if some guy's saying I can't find my cuckoos, like in front of like a real cobblestone wall in a castle, you're gonna like you're a moron. Get out of here.
When you've put it like that, it's
it's
like
just
a terrible idea.
Find the right medium for the project. And listen, the series that are successful have done that. So like at this point, like I don't want to hear anymore. Video game adaptations are finally getting good. We've had a bunch of good ones. And now they have a bunch of great examples to follow off of. So like, stop fucking up. Let's all right. Like,
and it makes you wonder now, though, like, are the floodgates about to open? Because remember, once Hollywood finally cracked the code on making comic book movies a success, and even and Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy helped bring the comic book genre into the mainstream and make it prestigious. And Steven Spielberg recently said the Dark Knight should have been nominated for Best Picture. Like, ever since Hollywood figured out that you could do these movies and these properties and do them well and do them big, and they'll be accepted and loved and financially successful, they've never turned back. Every movie that comes out every month or two is related to some kind of freaking comic book, right? So it makes you wonder now that, like, with all of this buzz, are the floodgates about to open?
How many projects did I just name? Like, God of War, Horizon. Oh, I'm sorry, we had Uncharted already. Last of Us is out now. There's a Gran Turismo movie off of the car racing game,
but then you realize, Brett, this just means that we manifested pop culture for ourselves. It's the things that we grew up loving are all that
BioShock movie. BioShock's gonna happen now too. That. So like, like no, the floodgates are open, and it's only gonna be more. And I said Assassin's Creed TV series in development. Man, like I just named 10 projects right there, and there's probably a million other ones we haven't even heard about yet. So like,
but I just laugh at the fact that, again, though, like pop culture has bent itself to our will. People us, people like our favorite things growing up were superheroes and video games.
And dude, the nerds, we're on top of the world right now. We're on top of the world. Yeah.
And meanwhile, I feel like, again, Hollywood used to have like a snobby attitude about that. Like, we'll adapt your thing, but we're going to make it cooler. We know better than the comic book creators. We know better than the video game developers. And now they're like, no, we're going to make it exactly the way you like it. Don't worry. It's going to be a fever dream of what you love. You know, I love that. But you mentioned Nintendo Switch Online with Isaac Wolf. I feel like that is a pretty interesting segue into something that's coming to the Nintendo Switch Online. We got GoldenEye coming, and it's also coming to Xbox, but I don't give a shit about that because I don't own an Xbox. But yes, GoldenEye with online multiplayer is on
so let's go through the details though, because it's a little fishy. So we did get an announcement last year. This has been rumored for so long, for years and years, but I don't know. They did some wizardry and they finally got the licensing under control, and we are getting a re-release. Not a remake, not a remaster, the original GoldenEye N64 coming to Nintendo Switch Online and Xbox Game Pass. So kind of interesting, though, how this worked out. And I don't know how Nintendo finagled this. So I'm going to start with Xbox first. So on Xbox Game Pass, so if you have Game Pass, it's included. You'll be able to play it. They did up-res it, put it in widescreen. And there is 4-player local split screen, but there is not online on the Xbox Game Pass version.
Oh, that's right.
There is 4-player local, a little bit of an upgrade, and also if you own Rare Replay, which came out several years ago and had a bunch of games from Rare, they will be adding this for free. So if you don't have Game Pass but have Rare Replay, you will also get this copy. Now, with Nintendo Switch Online, we are getting GoldenEye 007. I don't think they quite enhanced it as much as they did for Xbox. And listen, Xbox is not super enhanced. It's still blocky N64 polygons, but looks a little sharper. And like I said, they might do stuff. The Nintendo version is going to have widescreen support, so that's cool. So it will fill your whole screen, not letterbox 4:3. But again, I don't know how Nintendo managed this, but Nintendo Switch Online will have online 4-screen split screen.
It's going to crash. That whole system's going to crash on January 27th.
Well, here's the thing. Also, Nintendo's online is not great either. I think they've upgraded it. It's got better. And I have to say, I played Mario Party 2 again, like I just said, with Isaac in Sweden the other night, and actually it went off pretty good. Maybe a little bit of lag, but nothing too bad. So maybe it got better. But yeah, that's the only way you could. If you want to play it online, you have to play it on the Nintendo Switch Online version. But that's included. If you have the expansion pack, you will get that added to your N64 app on the Nintendo Switch. And we should say I buried the lead, and it's coming out. They announced today that it's coming out this Friday. So the 27th, this Friday, you will be able to play these.
Oh wow! For some reason, I'm still on some time lag. I feel like we just had New Year's Eve and January 27th is 2 weeks away.
Dude,
no, that's Friday, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah, so
that's
this
crazy.
weekend we can be playing GoldenEye and 64.
Wow. And by the way, I'm about to get Isaac in trouble. He confided in me once that of all of our mutuals who occasionally meet up with him to play Smash Brothers, he says, I'm the only one who gives him any kind of a hard time. He still kicks my ass, I should say.
Oh yeah, but he destroys me.
He's insane, but he said I'm the one who actually gives him a run for his money. So bada bing. Anyway,
I've given him a run for his money a few times. I've gotten some kills on him, but it's very few and far between.
He's a maniac.
He's
with his Fire Emblem characters. But okay, now speaking of people who listen to the show and friends of ours, friends of the show, supporters, we've got that old inbox over at the Fanboy Podcast at gmail.com. And there's a couple of emails we wanted to shout out this week and kind of address. One we kind of already went through from our friend Eugene Tan. He wanted us to talk about the idea of the video game adaptations finally getting good and this and that. And Eugene, we covered that. I meant to read your email at the beginning of it, but we got inspired.
But that was for you.
Thanks. That was for you. Thanks for sending in that topic. But Nicholas Wade sent in an interesting one, and he brings up like 4 different points, and it's a long read. So I feel like I'm going to read, and then at the end of each point, we'll just respond then, and then I'll go to the next one, and then we'll respond then. Okay. But he sent an email this is Nicholas Wade. He says it's titled A Few Comments on the DCU Past, Present, and Future. He says, first, I want to say how much I look forward to your weekly installments of the Fanboy Podcast and have actively followed your work from LRM to the Revengers. In fact, on LRM, you actually read and discussed the question I posed about whether the CW and the direct-to-video DC animated line were tests for possible moves to the big screen. I feel as if time continues to validate my belief that this was indeed true prior to the new DC leadership and will continue to do so. By the way, Nicholas, I do remember that. I remember having that conversation. I remember you sending in that question. And yeah, it looks like in certain ways it was a testing ground for some of the stories they want to tell. Lord knows it seems like Dwayne Johnson was taking notes on the animated film that had Black Adam and Superman fighting. But okay, continuing. I wanted to write this previously, but with the volume of DC related news and me knowing you and Brett would cover it, I held off, but wanted to share a couple of points. Some repeats from what you two have already covered, and pose a couple of questions before I just outright forget or get apathetic. Well, okay, that's fair enough. So here's his first point. It cannot be overstated how Walter Hamada Hamada, once seen as a stabilizer coming into the position in comparison to the tumultuous leadership and decisions that preceded him, was grossly ineffective, if not negligent. And the results of his tenure essentially forced Zaslav's hand in appointing Gunn and Safran, as well as the decisions Gunn has already made or in the process of doing so. When looking at Hamada's tenure at the DCEU, it is almost impressive to see how little of an impact he really had on any fiscal or creative success. For example, Aquaman was already in production. Shazam was modest at best. Joker was really discounted by those at WB until the teaser trailer showed they had something else on their hands. Therefore, an unintended success by the brass. I should add, by the way, that apparently the finances on that movie were handled so poorly that even though Joker made it like $1 billion, Warner Brothers saw very little of that. So Hamada kind of dropped the ball there too. But continuing on, the Batman was inherited. Birds of Prey was not a financial success like the Suicide Squad wasn't either. Both creatively satisfying. Wonder Woman 1984 was, in short, a hot mess. And Black Adam, well, we know how that turned out. Even if people want to give him credit for green lighting a sequel to Aquaman, the Batman, and the Joker, these were not difficult decisions to make. He's true. Like anyone in that position would have done that. Difficult decisions to make, as they were the only real examples of both creative and financial success. This still leaves the much desired Wonder Woman 1984, the lackluster performance of Birds of Prey and the Suicide Squad, and Shazam Fury of the Gods, looks meh, has yet to debut. Much like The Flash, with all of its production history. And then there was Black Adam. And even if some wish to throw him some credit for the productions on the CW or HBO Max, it can be argued he did not control any of those. Maybe Peacemaker. Only in greenlighting Gunn to do it. But anyway, the only real excuse one could possibly give him would be if, when taking the position, he was given parameters about what he could or could not do that may have tied his hands on some creative decision making. If these parameters existed, I do not believe they have been reported. If they do, it would be interesting to speculate what they could have been that forced him to do as little as he did. And creatively, he was willing to allow significant inconsistencies in character and plot development through multiple films. I am looking at you, WW84 and Black Adam, by using the Flash to reset if necessary. While I am excited and optimistic about the film coming out, this get out of jail free card is nothing short of lazy leadership. Heck, I am sure he was willing to say any continuity errors could be seen as time variations or ripples caused by the Speed Force, thus forcing the Flash to intervene. If anything, this would make sense. This would make sense why anyone would have greenlit Batgirl in the form that it was creatively. So let's just focus on that one. Walter Hamada was a feckless and ineffectual leader of DC. That's something we can now opine on now that his tenure has ended. And it's interesting for me because I was there at the beginning when he was first announced, and I was there trying to get a sense for what the hell it is he's going to do with this DC brand that he had inherited. And now we're together doing the show when his tenure came to an unceremonious end. And we heard that Batgirl got canceled without them even telling him about it. And he just kind of quietly disappeared. And now he's over in I think he's working with Paramount or Peacock on some horror movies. Nice for him. But in terms of his tenure, yeah, I know that early on he was brought in because he'd had success at New Line Cinema in the horror genre, which is what he's gone directly back to. And I know that at the time, I don't know if they were parameters per se, but I know that Toby Emmerich and the people who were running Warner Brothers at the time really liked that Hamada comes from that horror world where the budgets are low and the profits are high. And it seemed like after spending lots of money on Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, Justice League, and not seeing the profits roll in the ways that they were hoping for, They were hoping that Hamada could come in, tighten the belt a little bit, get those budgets down, give us some films with great, simple concepts that sell themselves like horror movies do, and run away to the bank. But unfortunately, they never really ran away to the bank, right? Aquaman was the big, oh, wow, we made $1 billion. And again, that was shot before he even had the job. And then Shazam, I love that freaking movie, but it didn't make a ton of money. I think it turned a profit. It wasn't a flop by any stretch, but it also wasn't some runaway success that now suddenly made Shazam a household name everyone's psyched about. You go, yeah, again, Birds of Prey, Suicide Squad, like none of these things really moved, shook the world. And at the end of the day, his run didn't amount to terribly much. And on the contrary, the plan that he had tried to leave in his wake of all these pocket universes and all these different networks and the multiverse has been systematically dismantled as soon as the new leadership came in, because they thought this is really stupid. We have Titans with a Batman. We have Matt Reeves directing Batman. We've got the Ben Affleck Batman. We have, remember Zaslav? I go back to that because he said, we're not going to have 4 Batmen. Like that line always showed me that Zaslav came in, heard what was going on and said, what the hell are we doing, Walter? So, yeah, I guess I can't argue with anything Nicholas had to say there. I think Hamada at the end of the day he was just kind of there. He had some ideas. None of it really took off or went anywhere or saved or reestablished the DC brand in a meaningful way. And now he's just gone. I don't know. Am I missing anything, Brett? Was there anything there about Walter that you think he deserves some more credit for?
No, I mean, when you lay it out like that, Nicholas, I mean, yeah, it's like it seems like he was pretty ineffective. He was just kind of there. And then, specifically, I'll just speak to the last little paragraph about, creatively, you were saying he was willing to allow significant inconsistencies in character and plot development through films, mentioned a couple. But yeah, I mean, I want to say too, like, I mean, Hamada doesn't also like strike me as like the James Gunn type. I wonder if he was like even having like super in-depth, thoughtful conversations about, continuity and plot development. He was probably just like, make the movie. Yeah, it looks pretty much like the character I saw before. Great. Like go put it out. Let's make some money. But like, I don't think he was looking about like, how the characterization changed and stuff. Like, I don't think he was that was really his MO. He seemed more like the business producer guy than the, and that's why like this is nice. Like Peter Safran is, not to say he's bad like Walter Hamada, but he's the Walter Hamada. He's going to handle the money, the production, stuff like that. And then James Gunn's going to handle the creative. And I think you just had a businessman that was like in charge of like handling creative. And at the end of the day, if your main thing is like the business production side, you're probably going to lean more towards that than the other end,
And if your big light bulb idea is to have the Flash essentially, be the Etch-a-Sketch that gets shook and fixes everything, yeah, it is kind of like just a lazy way to approach this. Yeah. Like, let's just make a big reboot, time travel, multiverse movie that solves all the inconsistencies and whatever. Like, yeah, the only credit I'll give him is that he inherited a brand in trouble. It wasn't like DC. Exactly. Was storming the gates. They had just had a Justice League movie that opened to $92 million. Okay. Like DC was not in a good position when he got that job. So he kind of had his work cut out for him. But at the end of the day, the choices he made didn't get it really back on track in a meaningful way, because all the movies that came out on his tenure, it was all very kind of hit or miss. And the hits he can barely take credit for. So, okay, moving on. And now it's time for his second point. Nicholas says, what is interesting about James Gunn's appointment is that his success, I believe, can have some unintended consequences across other marquee franchises. For example, if he is successful in getting the DCU on track creatively, increasing buy-in from fans and non-fans alike, and is also making a bunch of money, then this could motivate Zaslav to consider something similar with the Harry Potter franchise. And it could also force the Mouse House to start taking seriously the fact that Kevin Feige will not be around forever. and it'd be prudent to start thinking about viable successors to avoid similar drama. Can you imagine the MCU experiencing this drama? If they thought the feedback from audiences about Phase 4 was brutal, I mean, wow. Heck, it may even force them to establish something firmer for Star Wars, as opposed to Kathleen Kennedy taking the credit earned by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni for what they have accomplished. And if Gunn is not successful, this could lead to something so cataclysmic at Warner Brothers that it becomes difficult to fathom what that would look like, especially given how ridiculous the past 10 years have been. Heck, even if the rollout is just okay and consistent with its mediocrity, this is a far better alternative. So that's an interesting point too. We're all excited about James Gunn's DCU and all this kind of stuff, but if this goes poorly and we once again have a run of like mediocre box office successes and movies that barely kind of move the needle, that are liked by the fans but not really embraced by the masses, then it's like, wow, so now we've buried the Snyderverse and now we replace it with DCU, which is also not exactly setting the world on fire. Will DC ever recover if the DCU fails in some way? So it is, that part of his comment there is interesting. And also, the other consequences it could have, that, it'd be interesting to see if Zaslav sees all right, so giving this one creative lead the main final say on this property, maybe I should have a main creative lead on Harry Potter and whatever other big IP. So I could see him going that way. And in general, I think there's a lot of salient points there. I think Kathleen Kennedy has been very sort of hit or miss in her stewardship of Star Wars, especially early on, announcing all kinds of movies by all kinds of directors, and then systematically taking those films away from their directors, like Josh Trank, who never got to do his Bounty Hunter movie. Like you had Lord and Miller, who got excused in the middle of Solo, towards the end of Solo, where Ron Howard came in and had to finish it. You had the deal with Gareth Edwards shooting Rogue One and then basically getting fired in the middle of it, and then bringing in Tony Gilroy to rewrite and redirect half of that movie. So Kathleen Kennedy also,
there was the Game of Thrones
theory.
guys too, weren't they supposed to do something? Weiss and
yes,
whatever,
yes,
the other guy,
Benioff and Weiss,
Benioff
and Weiss were going to be doing a thing. So Kathleen Kennedy has been far from a steady hand over there at Lucasfilm, and maybe if Gunn has success here, there might be a whole new wave of hiring these brilliant creative types to come and be the ones who oversee the IPs.
It might not be a bad idea, but then, as long as they play ball and I think let, individual directors come in and do what they want to do with franchises. But also, let's not forget, because this is going to be the thing. This is going to be like the stupid buzzy zeitgeisty narrative. Because let's look, I know we don't like to always do this comparison, or some fans get pissed off, but it's the most apt comparison, as I always say. The MCU, as successful as it's been, as much as a lot of us really like it and invested in it, there have been some movies in there that didn't move the needle that well, that were kind of flat, kind of stinkers, right? We know them. We could probably name them right now. You know what I mean?
Or The Dark World. Yeah.
It hasn't been
everything in Phase 4.
billion dollar franchises. So that's the thing, is that let's say, whatever comes out first from the chapter 1 of this thing comes out and is a big success. Like it does, I don't know. I don't want to be crazy, say it does Joker number. Let's say it does Batman numbers, or gets close to a billion, 7, 8, 900 million. All right. We have a big success, financially and, in the eyes of the critics. But then they come out with, Blue Beetle. I don't know, and that one hits like a Thor Dark World, or like a Shazam. Immediately, every single fucking person with a Twitter account and a podcast, probably us too, that is going to be jumping up on there being like, oh, it's a failure. This whole thing's a mess. It's a disaster. They can't get it off the ground. Gun sucks. There's going to be all this buzz. And it's like, you have to understand though, it's just like not every single one is going to be a winner. And listen, if he comes out and everything is a winner, well, then great. We're eating good. You know what I mean? But I just want to temper people, because it's more just I just don't want to be annoyed by people jumping down the throat of the DCU if like one of the early projects maybe is not quite up to par. Like we got to give them a little time. We can't just go, okay, one movie was good, the second movie sucked. Oh, it's over. Meltdown. You know, everyone's gonna be doing that. All the Snyderverse people are gonna be coming out going, see, you should have just stuck with Zack Snyder. And it's just like I'm waiting for that because you know that's what's gonna happen here. But listen, if Gunn is not successful, I don't know what the fuck they're gonna do. They're in deep shit, honestly.
By the way, I know, and I think that's the biggest thing about that second point from Nicholas. That I'm like, that would be an issue if this goes poorly. What are we?
And I don't think that the consistent mediocrity and the just okay is a better alternative. I think it needs to be a great success. Or good success.
Be pretty great.
There can be a few stinkers in there. You know what I mean? But like, we can't have Black Adams. You know what I mean?
No.
But there could be ones that are perform a little lower. You know, that makes sense. But hopefully that's like the ancillary characters. And that's the thing too is like you forgot Thor wasn't an A-list character when those movies came out. And now he is. Listen, Iron Man, Captain America, all the Avengers they brought in this movie were all B, C,
Look
D
at the Guardians of the Galaxy. Those were D-listers. Who knew about the Guardians unless you were a hardcore Marvel fan? And
so if some of these like ones come out like that are some of like the B, C tier and they do a little middling, I think that'll be okay. But we obviously can't have Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern. We can't have those being the Thor Dark Worlds. You know what I mean?
No.
But if there's a Blue Beetle, in there, a Plastic Man that's like a Thor Dark World, things, life will go on. It'll be a nice little niche project. Some people will be happy with it and won't affect things too much. But that's the thing is like, there's going to be ones you're going to plan that are going to be, we're really going to do this with this, but it's going to gain some kind of traction somewhere, whether it's just grabbing some fans in, whether it's just showing some variety. You have to do that, and I think James Gunn is not stupid, and hopefully the studio itself is not stupid. I think Marvel even knows that. Listen, with all like I said, I rewatched Infinity War and Endgame, which are like they are excellent. They hold up. I think they're great. But they know, I think that they know they need to have variety and give other opportunities. And, that's kind of, I think what we got in this phase 4 so far, that's been kind of like, the reception's been a little mixed, right? I think even from us who are pretty big fans of all the stuff, it's been pretty mixed. So Marvel understands though, that like sometimes you need to just throw a little variety out there, even if it's not, an A+, superstar show. I think they're not stupid, like blind to that fact. They're not releasing all these things thinking everything's going to be a monster hit. I think they know, but they give a little bit to everybody. So I don't know.
By the way, quick detour because you brought up the Batman and what the Batman earned, right? As a comparison for like hopefully some of these DC.
I know that was the thing, right? Everyone's like, it didn't really do that good.
I actually wanted to comment on that because I heard something interesting recently that films that were shot in 2020, films that were made during the COVID era, it automatically added about 30% to the budget because the COVID protocols were so stringent.
And the safety people you have to hire to monitor everything and all the stuff. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. And to stop and go with cast members getting. So remember, Robert Pattinson got COVID during production.
He got COVID like 3 times during production, I think.
Yeah. So so that got me intrigued because I'm like, well, if 30%, if the budget increased by 30%, right? 30% of a $200 million movie, because that's what they say it costs to make.
It's like 70 million, right? Or something like that.
It's like $60 million. So that means that the Batman without the COVID situation was really a $140 million budgeted movie, which really explains why they like that $770 million return. And it seems like the people in charge know that like the next one ain't going to cost that much, because Matt Reeves is not doing these as these huge CG fests anyway. These are detective noir stories, and a lot of the infrastructure is already there. So they're not going to have to build all these sets again. They're not going to have to pioneer all the things that they had to pioneer to make the first one. So they know the budgets for the sequels are probably going to go down, if anything, especially because it's not being shot during 2020 when everything was insane with the COVID protocols. So I just wanted to put that out there too, because I would hear that chatter too, like, oh, it cost $200 million to make and it made $770. That's $100 million less than Batman versus Superman. Why are they happy about this, but they're not happy about Batman versus Superman? And it's like, again, they
also
know
the critical reception.
Budget, I mean,
listen, it's a business. It's about money, obviously. Of course it is. You know what I mean? But like, I think when you see like, they could look at that and go, okay, let's say, okay, yeah, it did perform $100 million less than Batman vs Superman, but the critical reception is so much higher. So it's like, all right, but at least that gave us some goodwill, and that also means that like you're probably gonna get more eyes back on the sequel, which, like you said, will probably potentially cost less depending how big he goes with it. And exactly. So like that's the thing, is you can't discount that. We always want to talk about money and just money, but it's like, but there could be a trade-off with the money if the critical reception is good, because that just looks good for your studio, it looks good for the brand, it looks good for everything. And I think people discount that a lot or don't mention that online when I see people bickering. So
now back to Nicholas's email. Point number 3.
I think I should read this one.
Go for it. Please do.
Point number 3. Random. But can we talk about how useless Judge Abrams has been throughout the entire tenure with Warner Brothers? After the ridiculous contract to utilize him and Bad Robot, I do not believe he has delivered on anything, and one would think the low-hanging fruit would have been the DCEU. Well, Nicholas, hello, I'm Judge Abrams, and I want to tell you I've been working very hard on the DCU, and I'm going to reveal stuff soon. No, I don't know. Yeah, he hasn't nothing's come out, right? They haven't released anything. Like, how many projects? Justice League? I mean, was that the only one that was like my name?
There's only one that was like mentioned somehow. And in general, like, what successful project with J.J. Abrams attached has come out since the rise of the Skywalker? I don't think anything. He's been basically dormant since the rise of Skywalker. So whatever Warner Media, paid to bring Bad Robot in house and pay J.J. Abrams to have right of first refusal and let him bring his mega producer powers to their studio, it's been for naught. Okay.
It's a 5-year deal that they closed in like September 2019. We are now in January 2023.
It's halfway done.
Under 2 years left of this, and nothing has come out. Apparently, I've seen a couple of projects that were starting to get off the ground, but there's been budget concerns. And then there's reports from May earlier this year that Zaslav is like not happy with this deal that did Hamada make this? Was this a Hamada deal? Like apparently he's like, what the fuck can we pay him? It was a lot of money too. I forgot how much money. I just had it up. I closed it out, but that was a big deal. I want to find that out.
Yeah. Damn. Okay. I'm getting ready with.
I found it so quick. $250 million for 5 years, and he has not come out with.
He's produced dick all. Yeah, that's nice. And meanwhile, too, like there was it's funny because he got a bad reputation at Paramount too, because like I think they had him on an exclusive deal because he was producing the Mission Impossible movies for them.
Right.
And then he found a way out of it to go to make the Star Wars movies for Disney, for Lucasfilm, while under contract for Paramount. So it's like, we're paying you all this money to produce original content for us, but you're making $2 billion movies for Disney. So Abrams has a kind of a track record now of like taking the studio's money and not necessarily making any money for that studio with it.
Smart.
And granted, the Mission Impossible movies they're successful, but like they're expecting much more. He's the Uber producer, and where all these different franchises and TV shows and things that are supposed to be coming from your central, whatever, your central hive there. So
money for nothing, and the chicks for free. Right.
Bam. Okay, Nicholas's 4th point. Also random, not to beat a dead horse with Cavill, but I think we have not really looked at all the announcements of him returning to Superman and leaving The Witcher with some additional scrutiny. For example, who the heck leaves an internationally successful streaming property to a plague written role, franchise, and universe without a signed contract. Furthermore, who in their right mind would make such broad announcements without a contract in their possession? Even if the answer was simply for him and even if the answer was simply that him and The Rock were pressuring the studio, I do recall others in their orbit, Aldous Hodge, I believe, talking about multiple projects when signing on to their respective roles. Either The Rock was really able to brilliantly BS his way through everyone and having them believe this newly conjured Black Adam rebooted DCEU universe was going to stick, or there was some legitimacy these conversations with those in leadership. I think there was a missing word there, but either way, I'm gonna keep going. I think we know The Rock got some egg on his face with the fallout of Cavill and Superman, but there have been a lot of future conversations even prior to Zaslav with several of these properties that either support there was some form of formal idea taking shape at Warner Brothers about the DCEU's future, or these players are giving unsubstantiated plans, details, and or rumors during interviews or social media posts. If this is true, I would like to go back to my first point about how Hamada simply had no control to begin with.
Well, Nicholas, you're not allowed to go back to your first point. You're just not allowed to do that.
That's it.
We're gonna have to cut you off right there. No, okay.
I mean, listen, my short answer to this is that there were no contracts or anything in place for anybody. It's pretty clear. If there was a contract for Henry, then that would be a different story. But basically, they were able to just tell him to leave because there wasn't a contract in place, right? And it seems like what happened here was the case of Dwayne Johnson putting on his producer pants and saying, like, if we just flood the airwaves with the fact that there's all of these exciting world building plans, and we tease them with Superman, and we tease them with Justice Society, and we tease them with all this, people are going to get excited. People love world building. People love all this kind of stuff. So when Black Adam makes a ton of money, we're going to get the Midas touch. We're going to get the green light to make whatever we want after this. And he was basically just trying to force the hand of the studio to go along with plans during that power vacuum that we've discussed across several episodes here on the show. So, yeah, it is insanely perplexing that he would leave The Witcher, although apparently that wasn't just about Superman. Apparently he wasn't happy with where the series was going in the next season. He's apparently a big stickler for the books and was not a fan of where the showrunner wanted to take things moving forward. So apparently he had his own challenges and reasons for not wanting to do The Witcher. But yes, going out on that limb, doing the big interviews, doing the big sort of press releases that they did, announcing all this stuff without a contract in play, just really shows what a naked power grab this was by Dwayne Johnson. He felt like, if I put this out into the zeitgeist enough, I'm going to will this into existence. And when
he was trying to pull,
and when my Black Adam movie does great business, who's going to stop me? And then it didn't do great business, and he got his legs cut off.
Banking on like a groundswell of fan support and Twitter mobs to like really make that come true. And it didn't work. It didn't work. I don't think the groundswell was loud enough. And then Black Adam just didn't perform. It's interesting. It was definitely like, it was a bold move on The Rock's part, and Henry Cavill's manager and team. I think they just I think they made a bad bet.
It was a power play that blew up in his face, and now he does have egg on his face, and he caused all this weird sort of drama and upheaval. And at a time when he knew that David Zaslav was out there looking for the person who's going to steer the DC ship, Dwayne's going out there into business for himself, trying to set up his own little Black Adam universe at New Line Cinema and center it all around him. So that's why I still, at the end of the day, say good riddance to Mr. Johnson. And now for the final point from Nicholas. Do you remember Zaslav talking about 4 Batmen running around? It seems he was talking about Affleck, Keaton, Pattinson, and a yet-to-be-cast Terry McGinnis. The fact that Warner Brothers was thinking of solely using Keaton to justify a Batman Beyond franchise highlights the disconnect leadership had with the source material. The animated show was successful not because it decided to pass the mantle to a new face, but it was able to still build on a universe that fans were entrenched in for 10 years while giving a new Batman and world their due. I would give anything to have been in the room where Hamada explained the current and future plans to Zaslav, who was connected enough to reality to sit there and think, what exactly is going on here? It cannot be underscored enough that the substance of that conversation was so poor that Zaslav had to take the actions that he did. And then he apologizes for taking up so much of our time. But Nicholas, thank you for that very, very thoughtful email. You brought up a lot of great points, and thanks for the support over the years. I hope if you haven't yet, you can get over to your Apple Podcast app and leave us a nice review, because we've still been at 79. I want my 80th review. Okay. But okay, Nicholas. So when it comes to your points here about the 4 Batman and Batman Beyond, I mean, yeah, it shows like a fundamental lack of understanding about what worked about that. Because you can't. The reason Batman Beyond worked is because we already had this established relationship, and it was a sequel series to the animated series in a lot of ways, right? So in this particular case, just suddenly coming out with a Batman Beyond with a Terry McGinnis we've never met, and there's never been, we like not really following up on anything that happened with Michael Keaton's Batman would have just been kind of like out of nowhere and trying to just cash in on the IP, the name value of, look, we have old man Keaton and we're going to get a new Batman. And, I agree that
you like Michael Keaton and the name Batman Beyond, right? It's like, well, we got a show for you.
Those are really hot right now. Yeah. So, yes. So, I don't know. Did you have anything else you wanted to add about that?
No, that's exactly it. It just, like they were just spinning too many plates at once and kept putting more in the air, and just like with no idea like how they were going to land or how they were going to keep them spinning. And on
top of that, and putting Michael Keaton, the prestigious Michael Keaton, putting him in that CW looking Batgirl movie was also just like, who's calling the shots here? Who's in charge? Yeah. Who thought that was a good idea? That now, after we reestablish him in The Flash, we're going to put him in a straight-to-TV Batgirl movie with a suit, with a Batgirl who looks like she's wearing a Party City costume. It would have diminished Michael Keaton's value right out of the gate. You know what I mean? It would have just cut off his momentous return before it even really had a chance to really flourish. So, just head-scratching decisions. Screw Walter Hamada. Screw Dwayne Johnson. And screw episode 175 of the Fanboy Podcast, because we are done, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, if you have any questions or concerns or anything you want us to discuss on a future episode, please email it to thefanboypodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us over on the Twitter at The Fanboy Show. You can find Brett at SuperBrettCon on the Twitter, and you can find me at Superman on Film. And until next week, be kind.
Stay fanboy.
Adios.